Stay connected. Stay informed. KOMO News.
I got a lot of people that care about me, and it's going to disappoint them to hear that I did this.
A suicidal airline mechanic stole an empty Horizon Airlines plane, took off from SeaTac International Airport, and was chased by military jets before crashing near a small island in the Puget Sound this evening.
Flew stunts over the ground and water.
100 feet off the water, right next to Ketron there. So I thought, somebody's crazy.
Bruce Webb, Stillicum Home, looks out over Ketron Island and saw the whole thing.
I saw him do the loop, and then I thought, gosh, that's pretty silly. It's a pretty good-sized plane to be doing that kind of stuff.
Just shocked.
Nick was with his wife at their home in Eatonville when he saw the Bombardier Q400 flying low.
Nobody knew what was going on at this time. And I look up, because she's like, that's not right. And I hear it, because I used to work there, so I know the sound of those planes.
The FBI confirms the rogue pilot's remains have been recovered along with the flight data and parts of the voice recorder. Richard Russell of Sumner, who worked for Horizon for about 3.5 years on that ground crew, seemed very calm as he did maneuvers in the plane that shocked people on the ground and obviously made himself sick doing it.
Sorry, my mic came off. I threw up a little bit. Hold on. Shoot. Man, I'm sorry about this. I hope this doesn't ruin your day.
Port Orchard has had some serious damage done by a windstorm.
It's incredible looking at some of this damage.
All of a sudden, the clouds are all really dark, and it's raining, pouring down really bad. And before you know it, everything was flying everywhere.
There's a lot of damage to clean up in Port Orchard after what the National Weather Service says was a tornado that ripped through there this afternoon, tearing down trees and heavily damaging homes.
KOMO's Carlene Johnson is along Bethel Road in Port Orchard right now, where uprooted trees are everywhere and some businesses are destroyed. She joins us live.
Greg, it is truly hard to believe that no one was seriously injured or killed. I just spoke with Brady Muller. He owns a painting contract business called Quality Coating. His business is destroyed, but they're counting blessings because his cousin who works for him had just left.
He was here till 1:45 just doing shop duties.
KOMO's Charlie Harger joins us live with what they found out. Charlie.
Elisa, I just spoke with meteorologist in charge, Logan Johnson.
So our determination was that we look at what we call an EF2 tornado. The wind speeds are between about 120 and 130 miles per hour, certainly on the high end of the EF2 scale.
Johnson says this EF2 and its widespread destruction are the most powerful we've seen around western Washington since the early 1970s.
Fire priority, we got 1 officer down. Copy, 1 officer down.
This is Frank Lindsay in Pierce County. The Pierce County Sheriff's deputy has been shot, and the shooter is on the run this morning. The deputy was investigating a report of an intruder. During the initial 911 call, dispatchers could hear screaming and a scuffle in the background. We don't know the deputy's condition. The deputy's been taken to St. Joseph's Hospital.
And we quickly saw a lot of deputies respond as well. Rushing the family inside. It was a very tense atmosphere. The sheriff came out and spoke briefly, and then about 15 minutes after that, the spokesperson came out and told us that he has indeed died.
He had a gunshot wound. They rendered first aid to him. The medics came, brought him here to St. Joe's, where they brought him right into surgery. And unfortunately, the wound was too catastrophic, and he wasn't able to survive the wound.
Sheriff Paul Pastor identifies the slain deputy as 34-year-old Daniel McCartney.
He's only been with us for 3 years. He is a young deputy who signed up to watch over other people.
Police worked all day trying to find that second suspect, and a visibly exhausted Detective Ed Troyer made the announcement outside the South Hill precinct late in the afternoon.
We have the second suspect in custody. So we put a 32-year-old male into the jail for murder in the first degree.
I just want to say I feel so sorry for your loss, and I wish I could do more to help.
Many others in the public also gathered along the sidewalk here to show respect and grieve together. This is Fife Police Sergeant Tom Thompson.
We're doing this too often. It's just, it keeps happening, and something's got to stop.
Charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping, 32-year-old Frank Powell and 52-year-old Brenda Troyer were bound over for trial. And prosecutor Mark Lindquist says more charges could well be on the way.
I just want to assure the community that we are going to hold accountable everyone
who was involved in the death of Deputy Dan McCartney.
KOMO News 1000 and FM 97.7.
Reporting the news.
Making sense of the news.
Earthquake. Oh my God. I got it.
That's the sound of students in a music class. They were scared as they felt the earthquake that shook schools, homes, and businesses about 10 miles north of the city. Scott Langley with the U.S. Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska, part of the Anchorage metro area, says his office was shaken up.
There's a lot of things have fallen off of shelves all over the Anchorage Bowl area.
Scott Rohde is a news reporter at KENI News Radio in Anchorage.
Well, I was in the newsroom preparing my 9 o'clock newscast, but I didn't have to put that on because power outages have knocked off our station.
He says highway ramps have sunk. Some roads are impassable because of sinkholes. Students at the University of Alaska Fairbanks could feel the shaking.
It woke up a few people. It wasn't severe here, but it was definitely you can definitely tell that's an earthquake.
Leif Van Cise was in his business class when it struck. Many of his classmates are from the Anchorage area.
My friend's saying that his house is having infrastructure damage.
Families being told to evacuate from some areas. Social media full of images of damaged roads and downed power lines.
KOMO News 1000 and FM 97.7.
Reporting the news.
Making sense of the news.
Okay, here's the homeless problem in a nutshell. We'll start with Governor Jay Inslee speaking at the Results Washington Initiative Conference in Olympia.
It's the best of times with the most vigorous economic growth, probably in state history, the lowest unemployment rate in state history. At that same time, we have people within 2 blocks of here sleeping in the rain in the state's capital, and that's unacceptable to us.
The 65,000 people moving to Washington a year and the thousands of Washingtonians sleeping in tents in the rain. Ted Kelleher at the State Department of Commerce says those two facts are not unrelated.
Since 2005, population has increased 19%, but the housing units have only increased 14%.
And that, he says, leads to a home vacancy rate that's catastrophically low.
On January 26th, the county found more than 12,000 people living without permanent housing, most of them on the streets, some of them in shelters. But Mark Ellerbrook with the Housing and Community Development Department says that number is misleading.
This is a point-in-time count, but over the course of a year, over 30,000 people actually experience homelessness in King County.
The latest estimate, 40,934 Washington students are actually homeless, not necessarily meaning they live on the street, but that they don't have stable housing. Students like Grace.
I thought I was going to have to drop out. I wasn't going to be able to go to college.
Grace talks about the only stability in her life is actually while she's in class.
When I was at school, I knew that I would have food, I would have shelter, a place to be under.
Puyallup does not have a homeless shelter for single men, and a new proposal could make it more difficult for one to open in the city. Councilman Jim Castema says they already do more than, say, East Tacoma or Gig Harbor.
Because we have a tradition of being generous here, and we do have services, somehow they want to use us as an example.
At last week's meeting, Councilmember Robin Ferris said the proposal is one-sided and doesn't include the community.
I love this job. Yet if this community approach is not supported by council, I find myself with no other choice than to leave public service.
I'm across the street from the King County Jail. The plan is to shelter between 125 and 150 homeless people here in the southwest corner of the building. The county's Mark Ellerbrook explains it will have a separate entrance and will be closed off from the jail itself.
So we feel like it's going to be able to really help address both the folks coming in from outdoors as well as their underlying housing challenges. And able to connect people to case management, housing navigation services to really help move people from the streets through shelter into housing.
The facility will be built on the old Teatro Zinzani site on Mercer. City Hall is investing $7 million of the project's more than $30 million price tag. Paul Ambrose is with Plymouth Housing, the city's private sector partner.
Not only is it going to bring 80 people out of homelessness, but it will also enrich their lives.
The new facility should be open in roughly 2 years.
At the Pioneer Square office of the newspaper Real Change, staff are celebrating publication of the Emerald City Resource Guide, a 130-page pocket-sized volume stuffed with names, addresses, and phone numbers the unsheltered might need, from housing assistance to health care to food.
The help they need, the resources that they need are in there, and they can flip through it and they can see other things that might be available available that they might not have thought of.
Last year alone, they served 315,000 hot meals at Seattle's Union Gospel Mission. Terry Pallas is the mission's chief program officer.
You know, we've been doing this 86 years.
He says, yes, it is worse now. Those on the street are often deep into addiction and or mental illness. But after making personal contacts time and time again, not giving up on the lost and forgotten, he says many do eventually accept their offer for help.
We're getting about 33% of the people that we reach on the streets eventually come into services.
And their model is successful, not just getting into housing, but turning lives around completely.
Of those that go through this transformative system that the mission has, 85% 2 years later are still walking clean and sober in community. And by the way, most of those people aren't taking government housing. Most of those people are back functioning in society.
Stay connected. Stay informed. KOMO News.
Sawant staged a press conference outside the Amazon spheres at 7th and Lenora, hoping to rail against the company for suspending planning and construction of one of its downtown towers.
Amazon issued a threat yesterday. They halted the construction of their new tower.
The head tax would amount to $0.25 an hour for every employee on those large businesses and would generate, they say, about $75 million a year for the city.
Iron workers from a construction project across the street prevented her from speaking. One of them even took the mic.
Amazon is a responsible developer.
But Sawant was undeterred, eventually able to make her point.
They are not standing with construction workers. They are, in fact, yet another big corporation in the history of U.S. capitalism to have resorted to bullying and extortion.
She called on Mayor Jenny Durkin to say publicly where she stands on the proposed head tax. With more on that part of the story, here's KOMO's Charlie Harger.
Jeff, not only did things get feisty with construction workers, there was a town hall on homelessness that turned into a shouting match Wednesday night.
You can also fill out a card.
And now Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin is getting grilled by reporters about where she stands on the head tax.
So it's a real direct question. Are you in favor of it or against it as it stands now?
It's a direct question with a long answer. I sent a 4-page letter that I think you've seen that lays out.
It's kind of a yes or no answer, right?
It's not a yes or no. We have a variety of issues that we have concerns with.
Less than a month after making national news by unanimously passing the head tax on big businesses, the Seattle City Council now plans to abruptly reverse itself and vote to repeal that tax.
KOMO's Carlene Johnson tells us that Council President Bruce Harrell announced the about face without warning yesterday.
When it came time to actually vote, you couldn't really hear it over the shouting inside City Hall. You could almost hear Harrell.
Will the recent decision by Attorney General Jeff Sessions to crack down on marijuana, even in states where it's legal, slow the momentum to legalize pot in this country?
Not at all. None whatsoever.
That's Roger Tilton, who spent 28 years as an investment advisor for major Wall Street firms. Today, he describes himself as a cannabis entrepreneur who tries to match investors with marijuana businesses. He says one impact of the tighter enforcement policies may be to scare away investors.
We may just be getting to that tipping point where enough Republicans now, who you'd think would be for states' rights and libertarianism and legalizing marijuana, but they just haven't quite caught up with the public.
A recent Gallup poll shows 68% of Americans favor legalization, and he thinks it's too late to put the genie back in the bottle.
It's way too late. It's way too late. I mean, once California and Massachusetts voted last November to full adult use legalization, 21 and over, it's like that's, the iceberg now is falling off the other side, and it's going to become an avalanche. Now the race is who's going to be next.
It happened in 1981. The Vietnam War had been over for about 6 years. Refugees known as boat people were still fleeing oppression under the communist regime. Pete Madlam, a Washington State native, tells me he was in the Navy back then, serving as a cook aboard the destroyer USS Ingersoll. Early one morning, he was up before dawn as usual to get the crew's breakfast going. There was a commotion. The lookout on the night watch was demanding the ship come to a halt.
There was a riverboat, a small riverboat, and it was out there in the middle of that South China Sea.
Pete says that lookout had to beg the officer of the watch and then the ship's captain to stop and check it out.
Skipper, I'm begging you, please stop. Stop the boat. And finally, after enough begging, the captain finally said, all right, stop the boat. We're going to turn around. We're going back.
The lookout was right. Aboard that little riverboat were almost 30 refugees, many of them members of one family, the Hoon family.
They were in bad shape.
They'd been out there, I think, around 7 days or so. No food, no water.
The crew pulled them on board, gave them water. Pete, the cook, whipped up a meal.
I believe it's soup, macaroni soup or something like that.
A couple days later, the Ingersoll dropped the refugees off at Subic Bay Naval Base in the Philippines. Pete tells me that's the last he thought about the incident until just a few years ago. That's when members of the Hoon family contacted him out of the blue. Many of the Hoon children now live in South King County, where they have prospered since entering the U.S.
They've all grown up, and they're all professionals.
And they were eager to learn the name of the brave lookout who had spotted them and demanded to stop the ship, to save them from certain death. Pete had to admit he didn't know the guy's name.
I couldn't remember. I mean, it's so many years ago. I served on 7 ships.
But he agreed to try and find him. It took 3 years. Pete launched a Facebook page for Ingersoll alumni. Remember that sea rescue? Anyone know who the lookout was? A man named Dale Joliffe finally responded. It was me, he told Pete. I was on watch that night.
It just all came back in a flood because I knew Dale. That name is unique. And I remember people running around the ship saying, Joliffe saw it. Joliffe spotted the boat. Joliffe was the one. And so I knew right then, boom, I found him. And I was like, oh, Dale, I've been looking for you.
By remarkable coincidence, Dale also lives here in Washington, in Vancouver.
It's just amazing that we're all in the same place. And I'm from this area myself.
Now Pete has arranged a long-awaited reunion. Saturday in Vancouver, the Hoons will meet with Dale for the first time, hug him.
They're grateful. They're so grateful.
And thank him for his bravery.
When they meet him, it's going to be a special day, you know.
Corwin Hake, KOMO News.
Washington's hard-hitting junior safety JoJo McIntosh. In the 1980s, his own family escaped war-torn Cambodia, eventually making a new life in Southern California.
They've had to fight for everything they have, work hard for everything. I've taken that with me. I've worked hard for everything that I have right now. And as a DB unit, that's what we do. We're always working hard. We're always competing.
Learning more about the hardships and sacrifice of the Cambodian people has been one of JoJo's goals, reaching out via Twitter and Facebook to share stories of his ancestors' country.
The Veterans Administration says 22 service members take their own lives every day. Many of them are victims of post-traumatic stress disorder. That stat really hit home for Air Force Captain John Budeo, especially after learning of the death of someone he knew.
It was sad because we all knew each other. We all knew what each other was going through, but he wasn't strong enough to ask for help.
So he has his own plans to contribute a solution.
This would be a woodworking shop. You know, there would be a section for coffee, working on flags, maybe have a TV to listen to the news, or just something that would get them out of their mindset.
The veteran plans to open his shop in Canby, a suburb of Portland. September is National Suicide Prevention Month, and Heidi Bjurstrom knows there's a stigma in talking about a sensitive issue like this, but she says sometimes being bold can actually save someone's life.
If you've never had the words, "Are you feeling suicidal?" come out of your mouth, you don't want to wait until you're actually concerned about somebody to say that for the first time.
How do you explain to your child why they might be a target of someone else because of the color of their skin?
Parents have said they want to talk about this, but they're just not quite sure how.
Psychiatry professor Marianne Celano is one of the authors of a new children's book titled Something Happened in Our Town.
You know, it's difficult, but some of the basic concepts are things that kids learn about in preschool and kindergarten. We try to teach kids to treat everyone fairly. We try to teach kids not to exclude anyone.
After 21 years in the Air Force, Chris Floyd now had to transition to what's known as civilian life.
Because I really felt it was incumbent upon myself to go out and learn about the new world.
Saying it is one thing. Doing it, he turned to television for guidance.
I took an approach of watching The Office, of trying to figure out what the private sector was like, but then I decided that was probably not the best way to go about it.
He found out pretty quickly old habits are hard to break.
I did have to work through that whole sir, ma'am thing. There was usually a 2 or 3 minute pause when I would meet somebody, and I had to get really comfortable with not standing up when someone came into a room. And another one was, it's no longer 1,400 hours, it's 2 o'clock.
The outside world had changed a lot during the 2 decades Floyd was enlisted. Eventually, he found a position and now works as a consultant for tech firm Slalom. The company's one of several actively recruiting veterans like Chris Floyd. It's the place where food carts have become fancy dining, where Cooch is the name of a street, and where a certain brewery offers something unique every Wednesday night.
We ran numerous events all across Portland, and we run them out of places in Salem.
Meet Eilif Knutson, a good guy to know if you have an axe to grind. He owns the Portland Axe Throwing Company.
This is an old practice dating back to Europe where they had dartboards on the side of pub walls.
Except these aren't darts on this particular Wednesday at Feckin' Brewery. These are axes being thrown. Dwayne Moloch loves cats, so it likely won't surprise you when I say he'll probably visit this weekend's International Cat Show going on at the Portland Airport Holiday Inn.
Just to see all the love that people have for their cats and see how people dress their cats up, and it's just crazy just to see the frenzy and to see everyone just showing their love. I love it so much.
But Dwayne takes his love for cats to the next level. To cat lovers across the world, Dwayne's better known as the rapper Mosho. Hang on to your hairballs. This dude's da bomb with feline rhymes.
I got cat emotions. I got cat emotions.
That's Cat Emotions, one of several singles from Mosho's collection of kitty ditties.
I'm just a hard worker who's worked hard his entire life and graduated from college, and I love cats, and I rap about cats, peace, love, and positivity, and how much I love cat ladies.
Nearly 800 kids aged 6 to 18 pour into Husky Stadium for Capture the Flag, football, rugby, even yoga. It's King County Boys and Girls Club's Summer Field Day, celebrating the organization's 75th year, emphasizing the importance of physical and mental health. Former Husky and New Orleans Saints receiver Lonzel Hill is a product of Boys and Girls Clubs.
It was a lot of gang violence where I was growing up. It allowed my brother and myself to get away, to meet new friends, have great social interaction. It also allowed us to be with some positive, caring adults.
Mo Hill is now the King County Boys and Girls Club area director. So many youngsters depend on services, especially in the summer months.
A judge in Lewis County might want to consider getting a side job as a bouncer after he was forced to take full control of his courtroom. KOMO's Jeff Pogula explains.
It started as a normal enough day. Judge R.W. Buzzard had a civil case between 63-year-old Ed Danzer and a collections company. But Danzer, representing himself, didn't take kindly to being summoned to court.
What it amounts to is I'm being forced into involuntary servitude. So my question is this a civil court or is this a criminal court today? And I think you have to tell me because I need to know my rights in this courtroom.
But a judge isn't allowed to give legal advice. So without any defense, Judge Buzzard granted the motion against him. And that's when things got interesting.
So here's what's going to happen.
Danzer attacked the opposing counsel. But because this was a civil case in a rural community, there was no bailiff or other law enforcement present. So Judge Buzzard hopped the bench and put Danzer in a chokehold.
You move, I'm going to choke you more. You move, I'm going to choke you more. You better stay still.
And he held him there until police arrived.
Mr. Yannick was plaintiff on a motion, civil motion. I granted his motion, and that's when that individual swung on him and attacked him. And so I left the bench, and the gentleman back there helped us and took him down, and I held him in a chokehold until the law enforcement got here.
Danzer complained of injuries to his face and a possible broken rib, but the judge wasn't done. After things calmed down and Danzer was read his rights, Buzzard returned to the bench and continued the hearing.
Before you take him out of the courtroom, I'd like to formally enter the judgment against him. Okay. We didn't get to that part.
Once the judgment was entered and the hearing concluded, officers had to wait for medics and other law enforcement to arrive. But that didn't stop Judge Buzzard from continuing with the day's business, all with Danzer handcuffed in the back of the courtroom.
Well, we're waiting. Can we go ahead and conduct the other hearings?
Yeah, I don't have it. I was just thinking the same thing.
Sure.
If you don't mind us kind of...
Nope, just stay right where you're at. That's fine. Okay. Is Brandon Williams present?
Danzer has now been charged with felony assault. Jeff Pogula, KOMO News.
Best part of the story, Tom, the judge's name, R.W. Buzzard.
Right? There's that old line, I think, from the Flip... Well, I'm going to date myself. There was a comedian by the name of Flip Wilson had a bit called Here Comes the Judge. That judge came after someone who won't do that again.
The clarinet is not the most respected of musical instruments. An old joke asks the difference between a clarinet and an onion. The answer, no one cries when you chop a clarinet into little pieces. But for Canadian musician Eric Abramovitz, the clarinet is everything. As a young university student, the Montreal native applied for a scholarship to study at the world-renowned Colburn Conservatory of Music in Los Angeles under legendary clarinet professor Yehuda Gilad. Imagine Eric's dismay when Gilad emailed him personally to reject his application. He was devastated. Fast forward 2 years, Eric decides to audition for Gilad in person. Now imagine Eric's confusion when Maestro Gilad takes one look at him and says, "What are you doing here? You already turned us down once." "I turned you down. You turned me down." "No, you turned me down." Eric investigates, and long story short, it turns out his college girlfriend Jennifer had forged the emailed rejection, apparently not wanting him to move away from Montreal. Eric tells BuzzFeed,
"This is possibly the most disturbing thing, that she was the one who was there, like, consoling me, you know? She was the shoulder that I was leaning on."
Eric and Jennifer had long since broken up by the time he learned the truth. He took her to court, and this week won damages totaling $260,000 US. Eric is still flummoxed by the betrayal.
The fact that she was the one that did it is, I just can't believe that someone cannot have an overwhelming amount of guilt just, lying to someone, betraying someone like that.
Happily, the treachery did not derail his career for good. Eric did study with Maestro Gilad, and recently he accepted a position with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, Associate Principal Clarinet. Corwin Hake, KOMO News. Music has long had a role to play in the live pro hockey experience. Maybe you're a fan of this classic. Or a little later on, this one.
Y'all ready for this?
If those old chestnuts seem a little old-fashioned for today's modern game, how do you feel about this? You might just get a live arena organist when the Seattle Orcas, or the Sockeyes, or the Kraken open play in the fall of 2021. Todd Leiweke is chief executive of Seattle Hockey, the city's NHL ownership group. He tells the Seattle Times live music will definitely be part of the NHL experience here, and even in this era of high-powered techno, expect the traditional organ to play a role. Leiweke tells the Times he grew up rooting for the St. Louis Blues, where in the late 1960s, an organist named Norm Kramer got fans so revved up, a local sports writer figured he was worth half a goal a game. So when the Seattle team opens play, you still might hear Rock and Roll Part 2. Just don't be surprised if it sounds like this. Corwin Hake, KOMO News. Even fans admit the 1968 album titled simply The Beatles and forever nicknamed The White Album can be a bit overwhelming.
Initially, I think people were a little bit shocked at how diverse it really was.
This is Rick Lovrovich with Seattle band Apple Jam, which has spent more than a decade recreating some of the Beatles' most intricate recordings. Now they're taking on The White Album.
We're still talking about it 50 years later, so it's a lot of people I know is one of their favorite records.
But these are not the songs you know. Apple Jam's new album is called Off the White Album.
It was a kind of a pun. These are the songs that were left off the White Album.
It's a collection of tracks demoed by the Beatles during the White Album sessions, but never properly recorded.
There's a lot of material that didn't make it on the White Album.
Like the George Harrison composition, Not Guilty.
Not guilty.
Apple Jam imagines how the tune would have sounded had the Beatles finished it 50 years ago. Off the White Album also includes Lennon-McCartney tunes originally given to other artists, now re-recorded in Beatles fashion.
Step inside, love. Let me find you a place where the curse of the day will be carried away by the smile on your face.
Apple Jam celebrates the White Album's 50th anniversary and the release of their own CD with a concert Saturday night.
We're going to play most of the songs on the White Album, And then we're going to add some of the songs that we did off the White Album.
Joining in the festivities, a classic rocker with an appropriate name, Alan White, formerly the drummer for Yes.
He was on the Imagine album. He played on Instant Karma. He played with George on All Things Must Pass.
Apple Jam's White Album anniversary celebration is Saturday at 8 at the Neptune Theater. Loverovich promises a good time, but what's next?
There's a ton of material from the Let It Be sessions that never saw the light of day.
Sounds cool. Let It Be, Apple Jam's next album, if they decide to continue their surprising decade-long run.
I didn't think we would continue. I thought it was going to be one show and that was it.
Everything you need is here.
Corwin Hake, KOMO News.
Everything that's not here is not there.
Stay connected. Stay informed. Seattle's only 24-hour news station, KOMO News.
With Lisa Jaffe, I'm Tom Glasgow. Jeremy Grader is at the editor's desk. And again, our top story today out of Port Orchard.
Tornadoes, a rare event in western Washington, but one touchdown in Port Orchard causing a lot of damage around 2 o'clock this afternoon. KOMO's Keith Eldridge is in Port Orchard and has more on what he's seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we were greeted with was a torrential downpour. Not only have to deal with the hurricane and tornado wind forces that were going on here, but we have been now inundated with the rain showers we were talking about on the weather just a few moments ago. It has been pouring here, so adding to the misery of having your home crunched and other things happening as far as people trying to get out of the way. Now you have the whole issue of what they have to get out to is this torrential downpour. They're trying to find places to go, places to get out of the rain, but right now it is just a horrendous situation out here. Fortunately, we have not seen any indication of any injuries as yet. They took a stretcher in just a moment ago. That stretcher left empty-handed. So at this point, all we can tell you is that the situation here is damage, yes. People displaced, yes. Rain, yes. But fortunately, at this point, we haven't heard of any injuries. Rebecca Humphrey is one of those people who's been here. She lives in the area. She was just outside this perimeter. Your home is okay? Mm-hmm. What was this like?
It was really traumatic. I mean, there's a lot of PTSD associated with stuff like this, all the sirens and everything, lights. Yeah.
What was it like to feel this wind come through and things sucking up in the house and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, I had friends that had their houses that were in the center of it. My house is okay, but my dogs were going crazy. They were on the bed and whining, and they knew something was up.
Yeah. Have you ever seen anything like this?
No. No, this is nuts. This is absolutely crazy, especially for Port Orchard.
Now, as far as what you're looking at here, and we've seen all the devastation, what's going through your mind as you see this and the fact that it just continues to pour down rain on these poor people?
I'm just hoping everybody's okay. I've got a lot of friends here, very close friends, Elio included. So, yeah.
And you've sensed your own personal tragedy. Rebecca is actually the fiancée of Officer Jake Gutierrez, who was killed in line of duty in Tacoma, and now you're seeing this. You've gone through tragedy. Fortunately, we're not seeing anything of that nature here as far as losing life.
I hope so. Yeah, but I'm not really sure yet, but I would hope so.
Okay. Rebecca Humphrey, thank you for talking to us. Glad you're okay. And at this point, all we can say is, as far as we know, there have been no injuries to report, which is incredible when you see all the destruction down the way here. The fact that we haven't had any reports of injuries is just an amazing story. So we're going to stay here. We'll be here throughout the evening for you. Fortunately, it let up just a little bit now, but these rains continue to come. And I've been here at KOMO for over 35 years. I've never seen it rain this hard. In Port Orchard, Keith Eldridge, KOMO News.
Now, we did talk to some witnesses who say they did see a few people bloodied after whatever happened to them during this tornado. And one man said that he went into the house where the roof was ripped off and found a dog inside because he was worried that the emergency crews hadn't even gotten inside there yet. The Christmas tree toppled over, no roof, but the dog was alive and inside.
We'll continue to keep you up to date as we get more information. KOMO News Time 421. Time for your Propel Insurance Money Update with Jim Chesko.
Another choppy day of trading on Wall Street as stocks gave up early sharp gains, briefly turned lower and finished slightly higher. The Dow Industrials rose 82 points on the day. The Nasdaq finished with a plus 30-point gain. The S&P 500 fractionally higher. A high-ranking United Auto Workers official will be heading to prison. Nancy Adams Johnson Johnson, who implicated UAW President Dennis Williams and others in a corruption investigation involving Fiat Chrysler, today was sentenced to 1 year and 1 day in federal prison for accepting thousands of dollars in illegal payments from the automaker and spending the money on luxury shoes, private accommodations, and lavish meals. That's your money now.
Some issues on the east side. Marina Rockinger with our KOMO AAA traffic.
Southbound 405 approaching 85th in Kirkland. The right lane is blocked with a disabled vehicle. We do have really slow traffic from 116th. In Seattle, southbound I-5, the ramp from North Gateway, First Avenue, a crash partially blocking that ramp. In Kent, we see a crash on the Gore Point, northbound 167 at 277th. And in Kenmore, Sammamish River Bridge closed indefinitely due to some emergency repairs that have to be done. Your next KOMO traffic at 4:34.
KOMO forecast, breezy conditions continue tonight and tomorrow. We'll have a high for your Wednesday of 50 degrees. 50 degrees currently in downtown Seattle.
KOMO News 1000, FM 97.7.
Now the top stories from the KOMO 24/7 News Center.
Meteorologists say the tornado that ripped through Port Orchard this afternoon was significant. KOMO's Charlie Harger says now that the sun is set, it's going to take a while before teams can assess the damage. Tell us just how strong it really was, Charlie.
Hey, Lisa, these young witnesses couldn't believe this was happening in Washington State this afternoon. Damage is extensive, and while it sure looks like we're talking an EF1 or 2 tornado, crews from the National Weather Service have to see it in daylight. Before he retired, that used to be one of Ted Beener's jobs with the National Weather Service.
Going to check to see where did the tornado first touch down, where did it lift up, so in other words, it creates a path. They're also going to look at how wide was the path, and then looking at the actual physical damage, determine its intensity.
Crews will be out first thing in the morning to make that determination. Reporting live, Charlie Harger, KOMO News.
People who saw the twister, like Elizabeth Smith, said it really came out of nowhere and sent debris flying.
And all of a sudden, it was just everywhere. Tree branches everywhere. Just, everybody's saying that their lawn art's missing and it's in other people's yards or in the road, and it's indescribable right now.
Other witnesses say they saw people hurt along with trees down and roofs ripped off homes and businesses. More than 1,700 Puget Sound Energy customers are without power right now. If the damage is any indication, this could be one of the strongest tornadoes ever to hit our state, second only to a deadly 1972 twister that hit Vancouver.
And because of this, the Red Cross has opened an evacuation center in Port Orchard for people who need a safe place to go after the tornado hit. KOMO's Sue Romero joins us live and tells us the shelter opened about an hour and a half ago at a local church. Sue?
That's right. At 4 o'clock, Colin Downey with the local Red Cross says they called up several teams to help in this crisis. The very first thing they did was to open an evacuation center at St. Gabriel Church in Port Orchard. It's at 1150 Mitchell Avenue.
But we do stress anyone who doesn't have a place to go, who's suffered damage, please treat St. Gabriel's Church as a place to go to the Cross Shelter. We're welcome to everybody.
He says the evacuation center will be open for as long as it's needed, whether it's one night or several days. Downey says they're also sending out caseworkers into that area to try and contact the families whose homes were damaged. Reporting live, Sue Romero, KOMO News.
KOMO News time, 4:34. AAA traffic every 10 minutes on the fours. Marina's here. Why don't we keep it in Port Orchard with some important information for folks in that area?
Yes, so we have road closures in the Port Orchard area, as you can imagine. Lund, Bethel, Salmonberry, Harris, and Chase, according to the Kitsap County Sheriff. Also want to make mention that Kitsap Transit has tweeted South Kitsap Alert. They're running ferry take-home service from Port Orchard, Annapolis, and Southworth docks. The rest of their South Kitsap service is suspended right now, so they just want you to stay tuned, and we'll keep you updated if we get any more information on that. All right, we do have some other issues to talk about. We do have looks like a new blocking problem in Bellevue. It looks like it's possibly I-90. Trying to get some more information on that, but it looks like it's I-90 right near 405 in the Bellevue area. We also have some other issues to talk about in Seattle. A southbound I-5 from North Gateway, a crash partially blocking that on-ramp. In Kent, northbound 167 at 277th, crash off to the Gore Point. Also had somebody call and tell me that both directions of Willis in Kent, heavily trafficked area. the crossing guard arms are down for the railroad through there, so it is causing some big backups. And the Kenmore area Sammamish River Bridge closed right now due to structural concerns. This Look at Traffic brought to you by Staples. They have stress-free UPS holiday shipping services and all the supplies you need 7 days a week, so gifts arrive on time. See what's in store this holiday at your local Staples. Next KOMO Traffic at 4:44.
Rick Van Sice with the wet and windy forecast.
Storm system after storm system for the next several days coming in from the Pacific. We will continue to see breezy winds and gusts above 35 miles per hour tonight and into tomorrow. The chance of precipitation not as great for the next 24 hours, but by late Wednesday into Thursday, the rain returns. High temperatures in the low 50s. I'm meteorologist Rick Van Sice in the KOMO Weather Center.
And we've got 50 degrees in Seattle at 4:36. As of this morning, bump stocks, a device used by the Las Vegas shooter, are now illegal. ABC's Allie Rogan has more.
The Department of Justice released finalized guidance this morning banning bump stocks, which can effectively turn semi-automatic rifles into machine guns. Las Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock attached bump stocks to his AR-15 rifles, killing 59 people in October 2017. People who currently possess bump stocks can turn them into the ATF or destroy them. A DOJ official said there are tens of thousands of bump stocks in the United States, but that it's difficult to obtain a specific number. Allie Rogan, ABC News, Washington.
White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says the Trump administration will wait to see what the Senate can pass before agreeing to any deal to avert a partial government shutdown.
The Senate's thrown out a lot of ideas. We're disappointed in the fact that they've yet to actually vote on something and pass something. So when they do that, we'll make a determination on whether or not we're going to sign that.
Last week, President Trump said he would be proud to shut down the government in a dispute over border security. He's been demanding $5 billion to help build a massive wall. ABC's Terry Moran asks Sarah Sanders about the president's campaign promise that Mexico would pay for the wall.
With the deficit ballooning to over $1 trillion under this president, where are the additional monies for this wall going to come from, and why is he asking the American taxpayer for them when he promised Mexico was going to pay?
Look, we're not asking American taxpayers for that. We are looking at existing funding through other agencies right now that we can draw on to do that immediately. So the president's been clear. The president has been clear that the USMCA deal would provide additional revenue through that deal that would show that Mexico is paying for the wall.
The Treasury, though, the trade benefits, if there are any, don't go to the Treasury.
He's saying that the revenue provided and the money that would be saved through the USMCA deal, we could pay for the wall 4 times over. And by doing that new trade deal, we have the opportunity to pay for the wall.
But trade benefits go to private citizens. They don't go to the United States Treasury.
He's talking about the general revenue that comes from that.
So you're going to tax?
No, we're not taxing. We're talking about additional revenue that wouldn't have existed without the president getting a new deal.
Have you done the math on that?
There have been a number of things that we've looked at in which we know will have additional revenue that comes in through the USMCA.
From the USMCA into the Treasury?
We think there will be more than that comes in.
That's White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders with ABC's Terry Moran.
Special letter to a little girl who lost a school election from someone who lost a pretty big election herself.
It hurts to lose, even when it's the 4th grade class president election.
I came in second by 1 vote.
That is 8-year-old Martha Kennedy Morales. The election at her Maryland school, she lost it to a boy. You know who heard about it? Hillary Clinton. The former Secretary of State and Democratic presidential nominee wrote to Martha, telling her to never give up. So, Martha, what do you think? Is a run for president of the United States out 30 years from now?
See what my schedule's like. And in 2048?
Sherry Preston, ABC News.
Yeah, you check on that schedule.
Well, no, her math and my math are at about the same level.
Time now to guess the KOMO afternoon soundbite. Your chance to win a dinner date on us. Listen carefully. Here's today's soundbite.
I smoked. That's the only regret. I shouldn't have smoked.
Be the first caller to identify that voice and win a pair of tickets to the Bellevue Downtown Ice Rink and Garden Delights at Bellevue Botanical Gardens. You'll also receive a prize pack from Alman Roca and a pair of tickets to see Dave Mason and Steve Cropper March 20th at the Neptune Theater.
Call 206-421-KOMO or toll free 877-397-KOMO. We'll tell you who said it and why in 10 minutes. Phone lines already lighting up.
KOMO News time is 4:40. Sports Now, brought to you by Divorce Lawyers for Men from the Harley Exteriors Sports Desk. And the Seahawks with some roster moves today, and unfortunately the season over for offensive guard Jordan Simmons, placed on injured reserve with a knee injury that he suffered Sunday in that loss to the 49ers. The Hawks also signing rookie running back Bo Scarborough off Jacksonville's practice squad. He played collegiately at Alabama. Seahawks dropping to 10th in this week's AP Pro 32 NFL Power Rankings. They were 8th last week. The team they'll play Sunday night at CenturyLink Field. The Chiefs check in at 3. The Saints won. The LA Chargers are now number 2. After 2 losses in a row, Gonzaga looking to get back on the winning track tonight, taking on UT Arlington. That'll be at the Kennel in Spokane, a 6 o'clock tip-off. Also in action tonight, number 1 Kansas at home against South Dakota. Number 2 Duke at home facing Princeton. And we'll have more sports coming your way in 30 minutes.
And we'll get you caught up on commute conditions coming up and all the road closures over in Port Orchard because of a tornado. KOMO News time, 4:44. We've got a lot of issues out there with our AAA traffic. Marina Rockinger, let's begin with what's going on in Bellevue.
Yes, we have a fairly new issue eastbound I-90 approaching Bellevue Way. A crash blocking the HOV lane, so that's why it's so slow from East Mercer Way. On 900, State Route 900 in Issaquah at 75th, the right lane is blocked, so it's quite slow from I-90. In Seattle, southbound I-5, the on-ramp from North Gateway is partially blocked with a collision. In Kenmore, the Sammamish River Bridge, due to structural concerns and emergency repairs, is closed indefinitely, so there are detours in place. You're going to have to circumvent around that. In Kitsap County, we've been talking about this most of the afternoon with the tornado that touched down in Port Orchard. There are several road closures. You need to avoid certain roads, including Lund, Bethel in some areas, Salmonberry, Harris, and Chase. Your next KOMO traffic at 4:54.
All right, we take a look at your KOMO forecast. Breezy conditions continuing tonight and into tomorrow. We'll have a chance of showers tonight, chance of rain tomorrow afternoon. Our expected high for your Wednesday, 50 degrees. Currently in Seattle, we have 50 degrees. KOMO News time, 4:45.
Stay connected. Stay informed. KOMO News, sponsored by Land Rover Jaguar of Seattle.
With Elisa Jaffe, I'm Tom Glasgow. Jeremy Grader is at the editor's desk as we take a look at some of the day's top stories.
It's looking more likely that California Senator Kamala Harris is planning to make a run for president in 2020. The Sacramento Bee says Nathan Berenken, the senator's chief of staff, is taking a new position as a senior advisor for Harris's Political Action Committee. Harris is in her first term in the Senate.
President Trump and leaders in Congress appear to be pulling back from a government shutdown over his $5 billion request for border wall funds, with the first signs of movement toward a possible end to the standoff.
A rare tornado touched down in Port Orchard just before 2 o'clock today, making quite a mess, destroying homes and ripping up businesses. KOMO's Keith Eldridge is in Port Orchard with the latest.
Yeah, one bit of good news is the rain has stopped. It's perfectly dry right now, and just a half hour ago it was torrential rains here. Miserable conditions for people who've already suffered enough here because of all the damage done by the tornado that hit down here at about 2 o'clock, hitting several blocks in this area just east of the Walmart in Port Orchard, and doing quite a bit of devastation. Therefore, we got lots of good pictures of trees into homes. There's one house with a roof entirely off. The good news at this point in all of this, considering how bad it all looks at this point, is that we'd have no reports of any injuries. Now, we have confirmed apparently from the National Weather Service that this was a tornado, and Nick Solis was working in this area. He was just on the street here. Nick, why don't you come on over here? So tell us what you saw when this thing happened.
Basically what happened was we were up the street working, and all of a sudden we started, feeling the windows kind of vibrating, and then, we started noticing the winds picking up, and then the rain picked up, and I thought that's weird. So I went to the window and I looked outside, and we just seen this tornado just starting spiraling, and then all these plywood roofing coming up, and we saw gutters getting pulled up and branches falling, and then I actually got on camera those trees right there falling over, and so at that point I was pretty worried. I live right down the street, and so I was kind of worried about my own, house and what's going on there, and so yeah, we're pretty shook up about it, and we're hoping everybody's okay. So
pretty wild scene here, Nick. Thank you so much. Glad you're okay. And as you can see, people are still trying to be able to drive out now. A lot of them are just able to get their cars. So these are people who have been inside and are now able to get outside the perimeter. As far as the home, the one home that you have seen over and over again with the entire roof gone, that belongs to John Mueller. We had a chance to talk to him. He fortunately is okay, and he says fortunately nobody was in the house at the time. Let's hear what he had to say.
I was at the shipyard and saw it via Facebook. Somebody had taken a video from the Safeway gas station, and as soon as I saw the video, I saw where it dropped down, and I know it was my house. And my wife and I got over here as fast as possible. What's lucky is my two children who were in high school should have been home on that floor at that time. When we got a hold of them, they said we couldn't get home because the road was blocked off. And then we told them what happened, and it's just an utter shock and disbelief.
Fantastic story for that family, considering the devastation that happened to their home. The entire roof gone, the entire top floor in a shambles. He says downstairs it's completely covered in water because of the torrential rains that came along with all of these winds. So even without a tornado actually hitting here, the strong winds would have caused the kind of horrific damage that we continue to see here throughout the Northwest. We just don't ever see funnel clouds that often. We see them every now and then, but not like we saw today, especially not hitting this densely populated area here in Port Orchard. But at this point, again, the good news is, as far as we can tell, they're still going house to house, door to door to look in underneath all the trees, all the debris. At this point, we know of no serious injuries.
KOMO's Keith Eldridge reporting from Port Orchard.